Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to be in all over the place, really, but emotional and spiritual quadrants. And our teacher is Theresa Miller. Theresa is a transplant from the wooded east to the wide open spaces of Wyoming in the west, where she now calls home. Nestled near the Bighorn Mountains, she first enjoys being a wife to Rob and a mom to her 4 teenagers. God bless you. I had one. That was just, Theresa currently serves in women's ministry in her church and community as a Bible teacher and a MOPS mentor, which was so much fun. I participated in that, but again, my daughter's 23. She is a Compel member and a Bible study writing focus group leader. And I just told her about getting invited to be a focus group leader with Compel as well. So we'll talk about that. That's just such an awesome whole community. Weaving words together has been the expressive outlet she has enjoyed from a young age, bringing clarity to life's complexities. Theresa authored Heavenly Glimpses blog from 2009 to 2014, where she captured glimpses of the extraordinary in the ordinary, everyday life of motherhood. She has been published on Encourage, Sally Clarkson's Mom Heart blog. I think it's pronounced Mopzine, like magazine.
Yeah.
And others.
Yes.
And we know one another through all the Compel community and following each other on social media. So let's welcome to class, Theresa.
Hello. It's so good to be here, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
I'm just so grateful for every time I can connect with folks, especially through like the Compel community and other writers,
Mhm.
but yes, other women and other believers. I've had non-believers on, and that's okay with me. My podcast, I
Mhm.
tell people, is not religious. It's faith-based because I am. But that means reaching everybody. That means
Right.
everybody has a story to tell. And what I talk about on here is more about finding and maintaining healing in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Mhm.
And that can come from everywhere. The Lord can use
Yeah.
so many awesome situations to bring to light what we require for that healing, or maybe something he's been trying to teach us and we get a little thick-headed and he's got to bring the message through whatever route. And then we get to be the testimony of how that came together to the person he brought into our life. And so
Mhm.
I just feel awesome that I have so many new connections, and I feel connected to some of the folks who've been on the podcast almost more than people I have locally with skin on. It's just we've maintained that kind of conversation and relationship, and so it's really a blast for me. Um, so I made 1,000 notes because there's so many goodies about you. There's the Dandelion
Yeah.
sisters, which I
Yes.
love the twist on the name now. Dandelions, Potholes, and Wrinkles. I can't tell
Yes.
you how that just makes me giggle. I believe your new podcast is going to be called Digging Deeper. Is that right? Did I read that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
all of this good stuff that you have coming up. So what I'd like to have the class here is your story. Like what
Okay.
got you here? And yes, maybe it includes your testimony, but just your story that got us to this place.
Okay. Wow. Where do I start? uh, let's start back when I was growing into my adult years, leaving home. We can rewind just a little bit before that. I come from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 12 or 13, 12 years old. And with divorce obviously comes uh, brokenness and levels of trauma, especially when you're dealing with children and things not really knowing how to resolve them. So we lived in survival mode for quite a while, even after the divorce, even after we came out to Wyoming, even after my mom remarried, and things were good and everything felt safe and well, but there were things that I just hadn't dealt with, and I had was out of touch with my own feelings, and that felt like a dangerous place. I didn't know that, but it had become that. And as I ventured off on my own, I had all of these big plans. I was going to go to college, although I didn't necessarily have that support, financially, or even just the encouragement, just because I think our whole family was still kind of in that survival mode. So sending us off was not like my mom's first priority. It was like, let me keep you here and continue to keep us close and make sure that we're all protected. And you know what I mean? Just these mentalities that we don't always learn to um, overcome or work through. So even me just deciding to go to college was a big deal in my family. I think I was the first one that actually earned my degree, although sisters have done that since, but I was the first one, and I wasn't the firstborn. I'm the middle child. So it was a big deal. However, I very quickly encountered these feelings that I didn't know how to deal with emerging, and the sense of needing to control whatever that was very, very innately heightened. Is that a word or a term? And
We'll make it one.
yeah, thank you. That okay, my earbud fell out. And that turned into needing to control that in some way in my life. And so that has manifested itself in an eating disorder. At first, just trying to not eat. And I never got to the point of like under 100 pounds and, terrible. I think when people started to notice that I was skinnier than what looked healthy, I feel like a little bit of pride rose in me, like, oh, well, I am a important girl. I don't have these kinds of problems. It's important that I have it all together. I'm going to college, and yeah, all this stuff happened in my past, but I've got big plans for my life, and I'm not going to be, you know, designated as having anorexia. So that control flipped to not having that label. And what I still was not doing was dealing with any of those feelings and emotions that I had repressed and stuffed down. So that turned into what became bulimia for me. It was like, well, maybe if I was eating something, feeling guilty for it, well, maybe if I eat it and spit it out, it'll be okay, kind of thing. And obviously that didn't last long before I needed to, so it just turned into something that I literally had no control over. I have a hard time talking about that sometimes because I am aware that people deal with that particular disease very differently. A lot of times it hits a young person and it's a phase, and then they get over it. Or at the point where I said, oh gosh, I don't want anyone noticing, I'm going to snap out of it. And a lot of times that might be all it is for people, from what I hear and from what I understand. And I realize deeply that is not what it was for me. It was literally something that I had absolutely no control over. And it was over the years. I mean, I went to my mom and I said, hey mom, I have this, I'm dealing with this. And of course I'm sitting here looking like I have it all together. The daughter who's in college, just all of these things where I don't know if she knew how to take that or how seriously to take it. I put myself through 6 months of counseling at one point because I didn't want it. I desperately wanted out, but it had that sense of control over me. So that is a huge part of my story and where healing began to take place. But it was something that I ended up having to navigate mostly myself. And so I think it did take a long time. It did take years for me, most of my 20s. And although I did grow up in a Christian home and did profess myself as a Christian, did believe in God, I also put him on the back burner as I try to figure out my life and go for that, all those big dreams that I had.
And try and take control that you were never going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a point in my early 20s where I, I just told God, I said, I can't go through one more day like this. I mean, if I do, I don't want to live if I have to do this one more day. And that was not a suicidal thought. It truly wasn't. It was a desperate cry, like, God, this isn't what I want. I can't do it again. So I see how his mercies were there with me every morning. There was just enough hope to just say, okay, let's try again. Let's try again. It was like, try again, try again. And for a long time, it was fail every single day. It was fail every single day. For me, a lifeline and where healing really started to begin, and where I believe that God met me in the deepest places, was the tool of journaling. And I learned to actually explore feelings and to explore what was actually going on and dig a little deeper into the past and the root of what I was feeling and what I was running from. When I did put myself through some counseling, I was a broke college student. I had, waitress tips is what I was living off of. But I paid, once a week. I went to the to see a counselor, and at that time, it was $90 an hour. It's a lot more these days, but 90 was the high end when I was in my 20s. it was a lot of money. And what she did literally was took my journal from me and read it back to me. And that's all she did. I paid $90 an hour once a week for about 6 months for her to read my journal back to me. So I really am a huge advocate of using a journal as a tool to explore what's going on in our lives. It's so powerful. And what I did realize as well is sometimes I didn't feel like I could write some things down. So I would just write brutal honesty at the top of that page. And I would give myself permission to write the things that I didn't think I could write, the hardest things that I felt either were just would break me if I actually admitted them or wrote them down. And what it ended up doing is validating what I felt. It gave me a voice. It didn't sound so bad at all. It was so it was that process for me was very healing. And I can't say it was the counselor really that helped me work through that. It truly was God meeting me in those really hard, dark, deep places. And it was a journey. It was a journey. And it was about probably 6 or 7 years of working my way out of that. And it was a point of complete surrender, just, because life was still going on. I wasn't just like dealing with this. I was still going to school. I was working. I was in relationships. I had friendships. I was enjoying life as well and just struggling with this that whole time. So through a lot of my circumstances, through relationships, the Lord just kept pursuing my heart and nudging me forward to a point where in my relationships, I felt like, you know what, if this next relationship does not work out, then that's it for me. That's it. I kind of had to get to that place of my ideas for what's good for me are not working at all. So God used a relationship to show me that my ideas weren't working and all my big plans weren't working. And what I saw best for me wasn't actually happening. So I got to a place of a little bit of desperation where I said, Lord, okay, that one didn't work out. So what's left? I said, if that relationship didn't work out, then there would be nobody for me. And of course, I'm talking about a boyfriend. And it wasn't even so much that particular person. I was just tired of looking for the right guy and it just being the wrong guy, So I just got to a place of surrender. He said, okay, Lord, yeah, I know you. I've been a Christian my whole life. but I haven't really been making you the Lord of my life. I've been doing my own thing, and I surrender. I surrender the pen of my love life to you. I surrender my choices to you, because I really felt like my choices were mine. Like, I believe in God, but listen, I'm
The
making my
fact that you
choices.
put a but in there is immediately what he sits there and I tell people that God invented the eye roll with me. Because the minute
Right,
we say
right.
but,
Yes. Yeah. So that was a huge turning point in my life. And I will tell you how powerful it is. And I'm not going to say everybody's story is different, but how it worked in my life is, as soon as I turned over the pen to God and surrendered my choices, that is when the eating disorder was finally gone. And that is when I met my husband shortly after that. And when my life began to build back up in a much healthier way. Because in that time, like I said, I was making choices and doing things my own way, but I was also working through a lot of junk, a lot of baggage, a lot of stuff, so that the Lord was working within me over a period of time. And so coming out of that space, I never looked back. It wasn't the thing that I was running from when I needed to like push back down the feelings. I allowed to just very gradually come up and deal with them. So then when I was healed of that, there was no turning back. And it's been what, 25 years, and I've never had a thought about food. And so it's amazing to me how that works. And it's not really about the food.
right,
It's about
much bigger root
all the
issues.
other stuff we stuff down. And it's powerful. So that's a huge part of my story. And I met my husband after that point of surrender, which is also beautiful, because I said, God, if it's not that next guy, then I had to get to the point of that next guy wasn't going to be the guy. I had to come to that end so that God could actually show me who would be the right person for me. So, gosh, I've seen His hands work so beautifully in my life. I don't even I'm just completely amazed by Him in that regard. So, what would you like? How did I get from there to here?
This is beautifully your story. I don't think you expected to say what you were going to say right now. I had no preconceived notions, and this is awesome because we all have these stories. Everybody's situation is their own. So there's no, mine wasn't as bad, or maybe I shouldn't claim. No, you are saying this is where
Yeah.
you were at in your
Mm-hmm.
after the divorce of your family and all of this, all of these are like symptoms of what we're carrying along with us like luggage. And it's so funny how people on the outside want to treat Christians like we were supposed to have a snap of the finger and our whole life is puppies and rainbows and everything we were going through is gone, or we're hypocrites if it's not and there's other stuff going on. But the reality is that our healing is not a snap. I mean, it can be. The Lord
Yeah.
can do it that way. But I
Right.
believe personally that for each of us and all the stories I've heard and all the stories that are out there, that what He's doing is shaping us and growing us through the healing. So it's not going to
Yeah.
be a 2-second transaction. Maybe in the
Yeah.
scheme of time to Him it is, but like in the scheme of
Mm-hmm.
our life, for that to work together for good, for that to get you to the place where you were surrendering, and then the man He has for you is there,
Yeah.
and the healing and the ability to not stuff it, but say, you know what, that door closed over here. I have the Lord and I have dispensed with subtlety, and I pray in my living room out loud every morning. And I say to Him, even with like my podcast guests, Lord, I'm going to send out invitations, and who you have for me, let them come
Yeah.
flying right on in. For those that you don't want, because weeding that out ahead of time, I feel like I'm choosing people well. But if there's somebody who I'm picking and you're just kind of like, no, then put flaming seraphim in front of that locked door and I won't pester them. If they don't get back to me or they don't say yes or they say no, then fine, love you, vaya con Dios, so I think it's awesome because it literally, your story isn't a snap of a finger, maybe in God's scheme of timing, but in your life, he needed that process for you to
Yeah,
get to the place where you had to say,
absolutely.
I surrender
Absolutely.
all. So that
Absolutely.
is awesome. So that brings us to you're married.
Yeah. So let me tell you how grateful I am for those years that I would not want back, but I am so grateful for it because I am such a healthy, I feel like I am a very, very healthy minded uh, person because of everything that I have gone through. I'm a huge advocate for not over spiritualizing our the negative things in our lives and the negative emotions and the negative feelings, not trying to cover them up with prayer and scripture and praise, although those are tools and we need to use them, but not blanket over our feelings of fear, uncertainty, anxiety. They're all still there. They're like you just said, they're not just, those things can make us feel okay or good or empowered even for that time that we're claiming something. But then what about the unresolved feeling still? And I have found that through suffering, that God, that's where we're in the deep end of our faith and where we meet Christ and where he meets us. But if we're just looking at covering that with prayer and praise and maybe just spiritualizing all of that and never going there, then we kind of stay in the shallow waters of our faith. And that's not what God has for us. We need to move past the baby stages of our faith. And that means we need to actually look at how did God create us? How did he design us? He created us with these emotions and these feelings that don't dictate truth, but they are clues into who we are and how we're experiencing this life and how we approach life. So I'm a huge advocate of that because I've been through it and I understand it.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean, and there have been sermons done on this, but how many times in the Bible does he say, do not be afraid? So,
Mm-hmm.
so many times. And it's not because he doesn't understand our hearts and that he understands us as humans as he created us and that we're going to feel that way. And then he usually follows that with what that process will do for us. He doesn't say stuff it down and go act like you're not afraid. He's
Yeah.
saying, you can claim this in me, but there's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
process. There's going to be a little bit of work we're going to have to do. Nothing that we go through. We don't just pop out without a sin nature and loving everybody. We come out
Right.
and we care about ourselves for the first 5 years of our
Yeah.
life.
Right.
So when we get in, like you said, to the deep end, it's not always the answer to say, just get me out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Swim around. Learn how to
Yeah.
do a beautiful freestyle or a breaststroke or a something.
Right.
Learn how to hold your breath for a little bit
Yeah.
and feel what's going on and
Yeah.
understand, because the next time it comes around, if all you do
Right.
is rush out of it, you're going to
Yeah.
you're going to collapse again. So
Exactly.
that's awesome. That's
Yes.
a great
Yeah.
picture.
And I have found that we're willing to explore that deep anxiety, maybe that is rising up and just sit with it and exploring that with God, inviting God into that. He's the one that brings the revelation. He's the one that brings the scripture. He's the one that works out the praise in us. And so I'm not saying that that's how we need to approach all of these things. It's not a formula, but that's how it works for me and my experience. That when I'm willing to go there and invite God into it, that's when the powerful stuff truly takes place and the healing takes place and the longevity is actually happening so that I'm not repeating the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Well, and that's
Sometimes,
true. Like
but
people like to say things like, when they want to discuss whether they believe in God or not, that, oh, Moses had this burning bush and Jonah was in the whale and all of these things. And what they point out, the people who are arguing are trying to say that we all need to be talked to the same way or else God doesn't exist. But the reality is, what each of those situations points out is that the Lord meets us in the situation we're in. And I don't think
Mhm.
any one of us is spoken to by him the same way. You know,
Right.
I'm a smart aleck through and through. It's like some sort of gene or something. And the stuff he does daily that make me sit there and go, well played, God.
Right.
To
Yes.
get my attention, to make me,
Yeah. Yeah.
course correct or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
What he's trying to say more is open up your heart,
Yeah.
listen, hear, press in, and you and I are going to become what I have planned for you by
Yeah.
working it out with me. And
Yes.
and yeah, sometimes it's us getting out of the way and people praying for different things.
Right.
But the reality is that there is an answer to every prayer. And
Yeah.
sometimes the answer is you're not getting out of this unscathed. You are,
Yeah.
at the free will of others in the world or whatever might be in the world.
Yeah.
I need you to learn
Right.
so that those
Yeah.
choices the next time around are
Yeah.
better. And it's different for each of us. I have a huge abuse story, and
Okay.
I talk a
Wow.
lot about why my story is different is because of how my interaction with the Lord was out of the gate, even at like 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't say that everybody's story is identical to mine, but I do say that you can see my Jesus like I
Yeah.
did. And so that's awesome. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's
Yeah.
definitely, we want to pray, we want to stay in the word, we want to grow that relationship. But when we are going through something, it's ours to own. That's our story.
Yeah.
And that is,
Yeah.
we work that out with Jesus. And
Yeah.
journaling and telling your
Yeah.
story, I find, has been so cathartic for my guests and then for people who go on and write a book about it. Is
Yeah.
there a book in your future about stuff?
There definitely is. As a matter of fact, the Lord impressed upon my heart. I believe it was the Lord pressing upon my heart in my 20s when I had these bins of journals about the hardest things I've ever had to go through. And I wanted to just burn them. And he said, just wait, just wait. Now, nobody's going to see a journal. But I think that he said, wait, because you're going to use them at some point. And it's been over 20 years. And I feel like somehow the Lord is going to use those journals and for some sort of book that is brewing and has been for a while in his time. I just finished writing a Bible study, and I feel like there's maybe a second one before I jump into
The book?
another book like that. But even the Bible study, it addresses some of what we're talking about, because what I do want to say is that just by going through the process with the Lord doesn't mean that it's one and done. It doesn't mean that it's not going to return. Oh, there goes my tripod again. Doesn't mean that those feelings won't return, but I like to think about it like an onion, and he peels back layer by layer. He knows what we can handle. He doesn't put it all on us at once. It's in his mercy that he says, okay, now Theresa, let's bring this up. Oh yeah, that's really uncomfortable. Let's look at this together. But then in another month or maybe another year, it might be something else. Or maybe in another week. Or maybe we're not done yet with this particular thing. So we're going to look at this again. So I don't want it to sound like just that one and done deal.
Yeah, no.
It's a constant for the rest of our lives, right? It's a constant peeling back the onion in his mercy for just these layers of healing. So this Bible study, the Lord prompted probably 5 or 6 years ago when I was feeling these feelings of defeat. And I know that defeat is kind of an umbrella for all of these things like depression and anxiety and fear, uncertainty. All of those things can work their way into our lives, and then they cause us to kind of back down or run away or whatever that might be. But I was feeling it hit me pretty hard 5 or 6 years ago in a couple of different scenarios. In one scenario, I remember I was standing in the kitchen with my sister, and we were talking about how Christ's victory, like we can just claim his victory. And, and usually when we talk about victory, everybody gets excited because it's truth, right? It's like, we have won, like Christ has won, therefore we have the victory. And yet it was only 2 days later that I was feeling this deep sense of defeat over something that I had made a mistake in doing. And all of these feelings of unworthiness just came crashing in. And it was just like, God, I've been like, how long have we been doing this? Am I supposed to proclaim my victory now? Now, when I've got all of these lies spinning through my head. And I just got to this point of, come on, let's wrestle with this a little bit because I'm tired of it. And in that honesty with God, over the course of a few days, he led me to Psalm 63. And Psalm 63 is kind of known for one or two verses, but it wasn't the one that says your love is better than life, which is like, I want to write something just about that one verse alone because it's so beautiful and powerful. But it was the context of the whole chapter. And then in the end, how David proclaims the victory in the end and the way he did it. And it was like the Lord just showed me this framework for what we see throughout the Psalms, all in Psalm 63. And it goes through all of the postures that David takes before the Lord when it comes to just prayer and praise and meditation and clinging and all of these things. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I'm missing. I'm proclaiming, but I'm not really living. I'm not really doing my part in this process of living out victory. So it just kind of hit me in a way that I started writing some like a little devotions about each one and a little blog series type thing. And then a few years later, I thought, I'm going to maybe just write out a 5-day plan, because part of my story is that I've kind of just been feeling like I've been spinning my wheels for a while, probably over the last 10 years. Like I'm doing a lot of things, but they don't really seem to be getting me anywhere, sort of. And so I've started a lot of writing projects, but then shelved them and haven't finished them. So about 3 or so years ago, the Lord said, I don't want you to start anything new. I want you to finish something, because I think that's kind of the biggest hurdle for writers sometimes when you're just starting, is just getting to that finished point. So he said, don't start anything new. You're going to finish something. And that was kind of that.
Then proclaim the victory.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's right. So I was like, okay, well, what should I pull off the shelf? And it took me like 6 months to kind of say, okay, well, the year is almost gone. And I said that's what I was going to do this year. So I need to pull something off. So I pulled the smallest project off my shelf. And it was that from the devotions from Psalm 63 that I said, I want to write a 5-day plan with that. And then I'll do something with the 5-day plan. And as I was kind of tweaking and kind of compiling that, I just felt like, oh, but there's so much more here. There's so much more. And then I thought, well, maybe I can make it like add it, journaling, journal prompts, and I could make it more of like a 5-week deal with some journal prompts. So as I started thinking about the journal prompts, it became so much more. And then it turned into what became a 6-week Bible study, because the Lord kept showing me, first of all, the Lord is so good and gracious to know that I was having a difficult time getting to a finish line. So I believe he said, okay, take the smallest thing off the shelf and finish that. And then let me show you what else you can do. Okay, it's just a little bit more. I could probably do that in this amount of time. Okay, I'll do that. And then he says, let me show you what else we can do with this, right? And so he's gotten me to this finish line with these little steps. And I love that, how gracious and good he is. So right now, I mean, that's, I've written a book proposal. I've gone through a focus study with amazing women. I just have to say, what supportive, I love the supportive writing community that we have, and especially through Compel. That's very true. But I had a focus group once it was finished, and they gave me feedback. I also had prayed about someone to just kind of proofread as I wrote that, and the Lord brought me this perfect woman who was gifted in what she was doing, just to be willing to be committed to the process. So I've had a lot of support, and that I'm very grateful for. Right now, it's in the hands of a publisher. They're looking at it. I don't know what will come of that, but to completely trusting God for the outcome, because I know that truly the outcome is his, the outcome belongs to him. So that's kind of the book that I have currently, and I feel like we could go, I could do one more that kind of doesn't have to be a sequel, but it definitely is a bit of a continuation, even though they'll be independent of each other as well.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, I saw, like I said, your new website. So you're not leaving Dandelions and Potholes and Wrinkles. Oh, but you're kind of doing your thing too.
Yeah.
You're going to have your...
Yeah. So that's also part of my story, is that I've always been a writer, and I went through that difficult time in my 20s, and the Lord kind of brought me out of that eating disorder. What came of that, there was so much beautiful fruit that came of it. One of those things was, well, like I said, journaling, but also poetry. Deep seeking and creativity sprung out of that. So I started writing poetry, and just all of this journaling that brought so much clarity to my life. So after I married and started to have a family, within a few years of all of that, I started a blog, and that was my Heavenly Glimpses blog. And that's really where I discovered my writing voice and being able to minister to other people, and just connecting with other people. And I made some wonderful connections in that time that I still have today. It's kind of like how we connect through Compel. It's like, these are like lifelong connections that you will appreciate forever. Well, I had those in that particular time as well. There's people that I met and connected with and love to this day. And when we started homeschooling, so we have 4 children. And when we started homeschooling, my oldest was in 3rd grade, and my second was going into 1st grade, and then we had 2 younger. And I decided, I felt like the Lord was saying, put the blog on hold, because it wasn't just a blog. It was the networking, it was the commenting, it was the connecting with other people. All of that just was taking a lot of time. And I even kind of felt like the Lord was saying, there's more than this blog for you. But at the same time, he was saying, but I need you to put this on hold, because this is what I have for you right now. So there's definitely a waiting period that I have had to, I want to say accept, but I chose it because I definitely felt the burden to homeschool. And that's something that I definitely wanted to do and felt invested in. So every time I felt like, I'm not, as far as I want to be with writing, then I would remember, but this is what you chose. And is it worth it? Yes. To me, it was worth it. So that's kind of where I was. But there was a point where in the very beginning of our homeschool where I wasn't writing at all. It was like I put all my eggs into one basket. And then I started to feel like this lack. Where is that coming from, God? Where is that coming from? And ultimately, he showed me in some pretty vivid ways that I won't go into in this interview, but he showed me that I was actually running from this idea of there's more for you in this. And he showed me that I said, yes, put the blog on hold, but I didn't say to stop writing. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I started back to writing. I'm like, well, I don't have time. Where do I find the time? And he showed me 15 minutes, even 15 minutes I can do something with, but I can't do anything
with nothing,
with you not writing at all. So I kind of just started back in, and that those 15 minutes would easily turn into 30 minutes or an hour if I had it. But if I didn't feel like I had any time at all, rather than just not doing anything, I could say, but I can do 50, I can write for 15 minutes. So it definitely got me back into that writing. So all of that to say that I've been writing a long time, but I let the blog go years ago, and I've been writing on social media for probably the last maybe 6 or so years that I came back with the intention of starting a blog. But then my sisters and I came together. We've always done some sort of a ministry together. We sang together at one point in our lives, and um, I guess there's always been like a sister connection that we've always had, and we've always seen ourselves in a way of bringing some sort of message or hope to the world. We've just always have had that since we were little girls, singing in church together, or going to our Wyoming State Girls School as teenagers with my mom, where we would sing to the adjudicated girls who were basically our age, but we would sing songs of hope, and they would all be crying, and we would stay after that little performance and visit with them, and my mom would be very motherly and nurturing to them. So we always felt this sense of ministry with what we've been through and who we are because of our faith ultimately.
Sure.
But so we just started thinking about the idea of maybe writing a book together. And then we thought, okay, well, let's back up a little bit. Maybe we don't need to write a book quite yet. Maybe we should start a blog. So that's where Dandelion, Potholes, and Wrinkles came from. It's 3 years old. I'm not even sure. I've lost track. So when I was thinking about my own blog and website, I thought, well, I don't want to do both. So I'll focus on Dandelions, Potholes, and Wrinkles. And now I'm just finally saying, okay, it's time to relaunch this website. And that's what I have right now, which is getting ready to launch. I think you can just, like you can go to the web address and it's there.
Yep.
But I haven't officially launched it, but it's there.
It looks great.
Yeah.
So many plate spinning, because you've got 4 teenagers, you've got,
yes.
and that is definitely our calling and a priority, but we can't pour into others what we don't take care of for ourselves. So definitely I love when you said, I asked you to set the blog aside, I didn't tell you to stop writing,
Exactly.
and are you going to say that there's no time in your day in 24 hours that you can't prioritize time to sit with him and get your story together? So that's awesome, because I do feel it's the same with like exercise. Everybody wants to say they don't have time. Well, but are you going to have time later to be sick? So like just anything, and if you have to multitask, when I walk, I make that my prayer time. I don't walk every day of the week, but when I do, and I get some of my best writing, I get some of my best just clarity when I go out and walk and breathe in the air. And you probably have fresher air than I do, but but you have just so much going on. And I would totally love when you get to the point of your book, actually, when you get to the point of your Bible study getting published and launching, I would love to have you back on the podcast to go drill down a little more. And then when it comes time for your book, absolutely. I'm counting on those connections for when my book comes out. I want, to just, I'll talk to whoever all day long.
Right. Absolutely. That's exciting.
So how I finish every podcast is I ask for folks' nugget. And depending on how old or young, I've actually had some great ones from some really young kiddos. But what is the one thing you wish you had known or someone had told you sooner?
I have written a letter to my younger self, so I've definitely explored this.
Awesome.
Yes, which is, definitely recommended, because when you do something like that, it's beautiful to see the compassion that you have for yourself, and that's probably would be the one nugget that I would say is to be kind to yourself, to have compassion for yourself and who you are and what you've been through and all of that, that you are a beautiful child of God and that you can trust. Yeah, well, I guess that's two nuggets. You can trust God.
That's okay.
Trust God. Yeah. Well, I
Don't
think
chicken
that
nuggets come in an 8-pack anyway?
yeah, right. Exactly. Let me see. And the third is, I don't think we can get, I'm positive we can't get to that place of compassion without that trust relationship with Jesus. And that's just the bottom line. That's the only way that I have been able to find that sense of compassion for myself, is because I have sensed it and felt it from my Heavenly Father. And so, yeah.
Those are beautiful. I mean, I have had the most interesting time when I asked for these nuggets. Sarah Geringer, I know you know her.
Mm-hmm.
Hers was, I wish I had known more about compound interest.
That's
Because
great.
she's gone through a divorce. And, and a lot of
Yeah.
times, not all
Oh, yeah.
occasions, but a lot of times when you go through that, you weren't handling money or things. It just depends. It gets divvied up
Mm-hmm.
differently in different households. But it was just so funny. I mean, I consider her just a genuine human being, and she loves the Lord. And so I wasn't sure. I don't assume that all of you, if you're believers or whatever, it's going to be spiritual or going to be some scripture or whatever. Some people
Right.
have had very practical advice. And so I love it. Everybody's has been so unique to themselves, and
Yeah.
even if we get 3, that's awesome. Then we needed those 3. So I want to thank everybody for coming to class today. This has just been awesome. And if you want to connect with Theresa, all of her connection information is going to be in the show notes. And I highly recommend you go check out both her website and Dandelions, Potholes, and Wrinkles, because that's adorable. And I think you should just dive right in and see what she's all about, so that when her book and her Bible studies come out, you can just be ready to hop on board, because I think they'll just be an awesome continuation of her story. So thank you so much for coming to class today. Please go to your favorite platform, rate, review, subscribe, download. All of it helps make me a little more searchable, and you can get more of this content. So thank you for coming to class, and class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel is brought to you by Skin Beautiful AZ.